TPR.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the TPR Pod. This is episode number 154. This week's guest is Ayesha Shahid. Ayesha is a person who I came across on Twitter. I wanted to get her on the podcast because she was doing something that I found very interesting. Most of the people on Twitter that you might see, that I might interact with, are of a similar nature. They live in urban areas, they work office jobs, they speak in English, that sort of stuff. Ayesha was doing something very interesting where she, it seemed, was a farmer. She posted about this farm that she had and her attempts at trying her hand at farming. So I wanted to bring her on the show because I could feel that there was a bigger conversation behind this decision. So I bring her on the show and she talks about all of it. And the conversation is much wider than just her starting a farm. She talks about how from an early age, she was very interested in learning. Perhaps not in a classroom setting, but that's the impression I got, that she was very interested in the activity of learning. And then her degrees and her early jobs gave her a great viewpoint of the situation in Pakistan with regards to poverty, income inequality, the trajectory of people's lives. That turned into city planning, and then city planning turned into her wanting to see if the land in Pakistan that people lived on, specifically in rural areas, could be used in a profitable way in a farming sense. Pakistan is an agricultural country, and survive and, grow and prosper and not suffer. This is quite a information dense episode. Fair warning beforehand, you'll see all the breakdowns in the chapters. Also, if you're watching this on YouTube, the main video on the main channel on YouTube, this isn't the full conversation. There's a lovely fun section of Ayesha's life, going from APS, moving to Karachi for the first time in her life, and then going from APS in Karachi, Army Public School, to KGS. That whole journey is, as a person from Karachi who is very familiar with KGS and the dynamics of the city, that was very interesting. But that's only going to be in the audio version. So if you're on YouTube, I've removed that in the interest of time and duration. I've removed that here, and we've kept it to her work. The farming conversation also gets a bit information dense and a bit information heavy. I think the key point that I wanted this episode to illustrate, or that I felt in this episode, in this conversation, was that Ayesha is a person who saw a problem, who saw a question that didn't seem to have an available solution that was at least being followed. So she tried to fix something. She took a solution-oriented approach. And that's something I find very admirable. So without further ado, long intro already, jump right in, get to the sections, make sure you get all the way through this episode, and I'm going to try my best to get Ayesha on for more in the future because, we like talking about climate change in Pakistan. It's an important topic, important subject. But before that, pod number 154 with Ayesha Shahid. Have you done podcasts before? Is this your pehla podcast?
I've done webinars before, not podcasts. So
अच्छा, webinars किस capacity में?
Like mostly on city planning stuff. But sometimes they invite me and they say, "क्या आप आके कोई दानिशमंदाना बातें करें?" And it's like, "Are you sure you want me on this?" And then they're like, "We're sure." And I'm like, "चले आप insist करें."
So what is your city planning background? Is this something you've studied? Is this your job?
So I've done a master's in city planning from the US. जिसको यहाँ पाकिस्तानी लोग नहीं मानते because कहते हैं 2 साल की डिग्री है, अगर आपका बैचलर्स नहीं है तो हम इसको नहीं काउंट करते. My undergrad was also from the US.
Okay.
But it was a liberal arts school, so I majored in political science. So a lot of people find their path to masters in city planning from more technical backgrounds. They want architecture करके आते हैं या engineering करके आते हैं. They want to get a little bit of exposure to the policy side of things, or to be able to look at it from like a higher city level. And then I've come from the humanities side into it. So I struggle with not sort of being so, trained in that technical language or that particular lens. The way learning process चलता रहता है.
अच्छा, तो why city planning? एक second, how do you get to the US? How does Aisha go from Pakistan, I'm assuming, to the US?
For my undergrad or for my masters?
For like whenever, zindagi mein pehli dafa.
Oh, I'm a army child, so
अच्छा.
posted all over Pakistan.
हाँ.
लेकिन जब वो crucial metric FSC वाले सालों की बात हुई तो अम्मा ने कहा कि इसको किसी अच्छे स्कूल में डाल देना चाहिए. And then we had friends and they were like, अच्छा metric करे, O level, A levels करें. They're like, नहीं, O level, A level करें. My elder brother was a big influence. He's like, मेरे जो दोस्त जिन्होंने O level किया ना उनकी concept बड़े तगड़े हैं. आयशा को आपने O level में डालना है.
अच्छा.
So we happened to be in Karachi at the time, and so there are some really good schools there. So people were like, Aisha ko kahan dale, and gave some recommendations. I gave an admission test and got into one of those very elite Karachi schools. So
do you want to mention which Karachi school?
I'm not hiding it. Karachi Grammar.
Yeah, oh KGS. Shit! अच्छा KGS हैं आप. Okay.
Yeah, and so जब मुझसे कभी-कभी लोग पूछते हैं कि जब आप अमेरिका गई थी आपको कल्चर शॉक हुआ था तो I tell them कि मैं जब KGS गई थी मुझे कल्चर शॉक हो गया था उसके बाद अमेरिका because उससे पहले I was an army kid, so studying in army public schools, Quetta, Risalpur, Gilgit, like Taxila, that's where I had gone. And then Karachi itself was a big shock, and then KGS was just an even bigger shock. But yeah, so the US thing only happened because I was in an environment where everyone around me was applying. Like I had never considered it before. But sab kar rahe the process happens gradually. Aapko counselors assign hote hain, sab aise dena shuru ho jate hain. So I went to my father and like, Baba, sad baby. He's like, de do, dekhte hain kya hota hai. De diya, sab sad 2 ho raha hai. Baba sad 2 de do, haan de do, dekhte hain kya hota hai. Acha de diya. Acha sab apply kar lu. He's like, haan chalo try karne mein kya harch hai. But he sort of gave me 2 conditions. He said कि एक तो अगर कोई financial aid मिलेगी तो जाओगी, otherwise we can't afford it. And like you're too young and it's too long a time. So he was like, it's only worth going if you get into a really good place. So it's like top ranking college कोई हुआ तो फिर ठीक है, we can consider it. So I just went to US News Liberal Arts की ranking and I randomly chose number 2 पे apply कर लो, number 5 को apply कर दो, knowing nothing, number 7 को apply कर दो and just applied to a couple of places. फिर दाखला भी हो गया, financial aid भी आ गई, to the point where my father was like, I've run out of excuses to not send you. Like मतलब मेरे पास कोई वजह नहीं है. So that's how I ended up. लेकिन once you end up in the US to a good liberal art college for bachelors, फिर उसके बाद it gets easier, आपको वो brand name मिल गया है. फिर masters में भी दाखला हो जाता है, नौकरियां भी मिल जाती हैं. So the rest was easier. That first was a stroke of luck.
Then after you get your political science degree, then you get into city planning. Now that's very specific, right? That's not like a general, because masters to khair chalo, they're all वैसे ही specific anyway. But city planning is also like, I have never heard of anybody else on Twitter, which is my social circle, कि हाँ भाई ये city planning पढ़ा है इसने. हो सकता है there's people who might be working in it, but शायद उन्होंने पढ़ा ना हो. Why that? Why did you choose that?
So I worked after I did my undergrad. I worked for 4 years. 4 साल मैंने काम किया.
अमेरिका में?
पहले मुझे बहुत नहीं पाकिस्तान में. I came back. पहले मुझे बहुत शौक था मैंने जर्नलिज्म करना है तो मैं पाकिस्तान में आ गई. मुझे एक दोस्त ने डॉन के एडिटर से कनेक्ट कराया. I got hired at डॉन. तो साल एक वो काम किया and then I was like कुछ मजा नहीं आ रहा. You just sort of doing developmental journalist कि आपकी किसी डीजी के साथ दोस्ती है, किसी politician के साथ दोस्ती है, आप खबर निकाल के ले आए हैं. Journalism, like I had just moved into Pindi, I didn't know anyone or anything, so it was also very difficult. मैं कहाँ से story ढूंढ के निकाल के लाऊं? So I found it difficult, and it's a difficult field in Pakistan. There's a lot of women, but there's also problems with harassment and things. So there were difficulties there. I had a lovely boss. Alpha Noor was my boss. She hired me. So within like a year, I was like, ये कुछ मजा नहीं आ रहा. You're just kind of witnessing things and you're not part of actually thinking about the problems or doing anything about it, which is the wrong approach, right? Journalism does a lot, but I wasn't able to grasp that at that time.
Right.
Then I was like, अच्छा government में development sector में चले जाओ. So I ended up getting a job at Benazir Income Support Program. So I worked with them and वहाँ पे little bit exposure to poverty and poverty related research, right? And you start thinking about what is poverty, who is poor, where are they located, and then I ended up joining the World Bank as a consultant. Also, कुछ governance projects के ऊपर काम करी थी. And something that came out a lot is actually that the nature of a lot of these phenomena is spatial in nature. मतलब वो कहीं पर हो रहे हैं. They are located in a place and time.
It's
Right?
what? What's the word? I think your audio dropped out a
Spatial.
bit.
Spatial, place-based.
Spatial what?
In nature. Spatial
In nature. Right. Yeah. Okay.
And so, even something like the Benazir Income Support Program is approaching poverty in a very individual manner. It is saying कि पूरे मुल्क में आप एक proxy mean based targeting survey करें और आप कहें कि ये लोग जो हैं हमने इनकी asset की measurement की और हमने estimate किया है कि they're too poor and they need some help to, let's say, avoid starvation levels. थोड़ी उनको मदद हो जाएगी, उनको आप cash दे दें, which is fine and great. People should be given that bare minimum help. They should be given more than that.
Sure.
But what it's not able to identify or solve is that poverty has a very specific spatial dimension. For example, rural areas are poorer because they're away from markets, they're away from skill sets, they're maybe away from irrigation canals. और वो पूरा गांव है वो बहुत गरीब होगा. तो पिंडी का जो एक गांव है और जो साउथ पंजाब का जो सिंध का एक गांव है, the level of poverty there are very, very different because the spatial economies of these places look very, very different. What BISP is saying कि मैं पिंडी के गांव का भी गरीब बंदा उठाऊंगा और मैं सिंध के गांव का भी गरीब बंदा उठाऊंगा. अगर वो मेरे क्राइटेरिया पे पूरा आता है तो मुझको थोड़ा कैश दे दूंगा. And that's as far as it goes. It's not going so far as to then thinking about what is the spatial specific dimensions of that particular place's political economy and sociology and all of that. कि वो structurally वो लोग गरीबी हैं और गरीबी रहेंगे, yet they're not able to develop. And so in all the work that I was doing, and that's the specific nature of a lot of neoliberal and liberal thinking, that it approaches each problem from a very individual level, right? It's not meant to look at a larger structural manner. It's saying कि बस हर individual को आप बराबर मौका दे रही हैं, तो one fit type all solutions निकालते हैं आप. And so that was sort of at that time, that was sort of my understanding of the problem. कि हम बहुत सिंगल डिमेंशन नेचर से देख रहे हैं कि स्पेशल एलिमेंट को कंसिडर करने की जरूरत है. And there then urban planning is sort of an easy connection there because it looks at things very spatially.
Yeah. So why were you, how were you aware of this?
I lost your voice.
Oh, Makero, how were you aware that this was a problem? Like, the spatial thing is a key factor that is not being considered by Benazir. They're sort of like treating the symptoms, but they're not looking at the underlying structural issues that lead to those symptoms and how they might differ jaga to jaga. Why did you...
It's covered in literature. So, I'm sitting at BISP and I'm studying poverty literature and, this is something that comes up a lot. So poverty literature is very aware of this and will bring it up. The other reason I was aware of it is because उस वक्त पंजाब हुकूमत में एक बड़ा फैशन था कि हर चीज को ना आप स्मार्टफोन के ऊपर डिजिटाइज करें. And that was one of the projects that I was working on. And one of the advantages of trying to digitize government functions कि आपने वैक्सीनेटर को स्मार्टफोन दे दिया, आपने एग्रीकल्चर एक्सटेंशन वर्कर को स्मार्टफोन दे दिया, आप वो जहाँ पर भी जाएंगे आपको कुछ वेरिफिकेशन हो जाएगी. They will go and do some data entry, take a picture, take a geolocation. So you know कि वो बंदा गया उधर, उसने वो काम किया और उसने कुछ लोगों अपने क्लाइंट को अप्रोच किया, उसको वैक्सीनेट किया, and you collect this data. And so I was working on a project that was working on this. But then the big buzzword was GIS at that time. कि location data आपके पास आ रहा है, which immediately opens up massive possibilities for how you study and analyze the work that's being done, where governance is happening, where coverage is and isn't it. So वो भी, that also had a very unique spatial nature. तो वो भी था कि अच्छा आप GIS कहाँ पढ़ते हैं जी, आप urban planning में जाकर पढ़ते हैं. And then of course a lot of this research work and like governance work is very intangible. बस आप systems के ऊपर काम करें ना. So I always had a desire कि कुछ tangible चीज के ऊपर काम करना चाहिए. And so city planning was sort of like a big mix of all of these things. And
it's curious
sort of
that you...
back to my previous interest in civil engineering. I was like, civil engineer to नहीं बन सकती. This is your close proxy.
I was thinking about this sort of there's some link here to your school experience where you said कि KGS में theater पे बड़ा focus है and sports day is like a 2-month prep thing and normal APS that you went to, these things were just not existing there. And there's all this which is sort of like a simplistic way of looking at it would be कि हाँ जी बड़ी privilege की बात है, which is fair, sure कि privilege allows access to all these things, but there are people like who went through APSC or other schools, city school, their whole lives, and they were just never exposed to that level of ideas कि हाँ भी थिएटर में भी सोचा जा सकता है या स्पोर्ट्स डे पे इतनी मेहनत की जा सकती
हाँ
है.
क्या मतलब इतनी क्या कहेंगे मल्टी सेक्टोरल व्हाटएवर मल्टी स्किल्ड हो सकते हैं या
हाँ and that you might be interested in these things because पाकिस्तान में तो खैर obviously आप पढ़ते हैं to get a job. That's the only purpose, and you study what is likelier to get you a job. The other thing is कि तुमने तो ये सोच लिया, and you said that you found out about this spatial aspect because of the research that they had. Why now? I don't want you to speak for them, but like you can't be the only person who knows about this over there. So, but this is not being addressed. It's not their purpose to address it from this aspect. Would you know why?
I mean, हाँ मतलब जो BISP है ना वो poverty alleviation के ऊपर काम कर रहा है. They call themselves the poverty alleviation program, and then they are looking at developing graduation strategies. They want to look at what are strategies that can help these families graduate out of poverty. या आपने एक immediate starvation level में तो उनको एक rescue दे दिया. You try to give immediate cash that they can put to whatever they think is the most useful. You've given it to women, head of the household, and therefore you've empowered them. We know कि ख़वातीन अपने ऊपर खर्च नहीं करती, अपने बच्चों के ऊपर, अपने घराने के ऊपर खर्च करती हैं. And so you empowered them, and there's much work on whether that succeeds or not. So and then there's a number of different graduation strategies they were working on. जैसे microfinance का project था उसके ऊपर काम कर रहे थे. health के ऊपर immediately मुझे नहीं याद आ रहा, but they had a big education program, conditional cash transfers दे रहे थे कि if a poor family is not able to send their kids to school because they need the kid to be working somewhere and be earning for the family, so giving them incentives कि अच्छा अगर वो 70% attendance show करेगा तो हम आपका जो basic grant है उसको supplement कर देंगे. So they were working on programs like that, but it remained an individual driven या household driven program. I think there's two answers to those questions, and please be aware that I'm not a macroeconomist and I don't study these things systematically.
I am also not.
लेकिन जो मेरा सेंस है कि there's two things. एक तो BISP रहेगा कि ये हमारे मतलब immediate उसमें नहीं आता, because then you're talking about larger macroeconomic issues, right? कि अगर आपने फर्स्ट करें सिंध का विलेज आइडेंटिफाई कर लिया और उसमें आपने आइडेंटिफाई किया कि 50% ऑफ द households are BISP beneficiaries, यानी कि इस गांव में वाकई बहुत गुर्बत है, तो इस गांव को अपलिफ्ट करने के लिए क्या करना चाहिए? Then that becomes a problem of what is your rural economy model? कि सिंध हुकूमत का रूरल इकोनॉमी को डेवलप करने का क्या मॉडल है? And BISP working at the federal level doesn't quite have the mandate to be able to address that specifically. It can let Sindh government know कि ये आपके 10 गांव हैं जहाँ पर बहुत ज्यादा prevalence है of beneficiary households. तो एक तो आई थिंक देयर इज अ लिटिल बिट ऑफ अ मैंडेट जुरिसडिक्शनल इशू, या अगर अर्बन किसी महल्ले के अंदर बहुत ज्यादा BISP बेनिफिशियरीज हैं तो फिर व्हाट कैन BISP डू अबाउट इट? इट सॉर्ट ऑफ फॉल्स अंडर द मैंडेट ऑफ द सिटी गवर्नमेंट. व्हाट आर यू गोइंग टू डू अबाउट द इकोनॉमिक अपलिफ्ट ऑफ दैट एरिया और क्रिएटिंग अपॉर्चुनिटीज देयर? एंड दोस फॉल इन लार्जर मैक्रो इकोनॉमिक पॉलिसी इशू ना, कि आपके शहरों के अंदर फैक्ट्रियां लगनी चाहिए, कि आप सब्सिडी देंगे, कि आप ज़राअत को प्रमोट करेंगे. सो ऑल ऑफ दोस हैज टू कम फ्रॉम दैट लार्जर इकोनॉमिक focus. But the second is also that we don't seem to think spatially in any of our policies. मतलब किसी भी सेक्टर आगे आप पॉलिसी उठा लें तो it's sort of like it's sectoral. It's पूरे एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर की एक पॉलिसी होगी, एक पंजाब की पॉलिसी होगी. अच्छा बहुत करेंगे तो बनानी की अलग कर देंगे और शुगर केन कॉटन की अलग कर देंगे. But it never goes so far down to think about इस पर्टिकुलर इलाके की या इस गांव का क्या मॉडल होगा. मतलब no policy goes that granular, and I think that's one of the problems, is that all of our policy making is so top down and so centralized, and that's where the whole conversation around local governments come around कि जो बहुत धक्का करके स्ट्रगल करके भी आपने इवॉल्व किया तो प्रोविंशियल लेवल तक ही लेके गए, उसके बाद एक और आप स्ट्रगल में अटक गए, उससे नीचे जा नहीं सका. And so I think that's sort of a larger dilemma that needs to be solved in the entire country.
So then you head into than your city planning degree. So did you know city planning is then urban planning, city planning is your area of interest after BISP?
मतलब okay, so when I went for my masters, I was like, एक तो मैं career track change करना चाह रही हूँ. Like I don't
अच्छा.
want to keep it like a development practitioner. And then the second was कि I would want to now have some technical skills. Yeah, I've
Okay.
come from very liberal arts किस्म का background and then done more liberal arts stuff. तो कोई technical skills होनी चाहिए. So a very like मतलब ऑपरेटिव किस्म का पर्पस ये था कि मैं कोई डेटा स्किल सीख लूँ, कोई जीआईएस सीख लूँ, ताकि बाद में मुझे कोई नौकरी भी मिल जाए. तो एक तो ये मकसद था. But the city planning, मतलब I wasn't really aware of what I was getting into. I like looked up some programs, I applied, didn't fully comprehend what it entails, and I think that was one of the reasons कि मैं इतना benefit भी नहीं कर पाई, because a lot of the program I spent learning about what are the possibilities of the field, and
Sure.
A lot of programs in the US are really broad. You can kind of just pick any direction and go crazy with it. So I kept having a taste of different things, but didn't really specialize. But my interest was never very specific to कि मैं जाके ये सीख लूँ कि शहर में घर कहाँ होनी चाहिए, सड़क कहाँ होनी चाहिए, बस कहाँ होनी चाहिए, but rather more geographical, because it was coming from that spatial lens, right? So like one of the things we learn in our programs is that there is no rural urban binary. It's like it's all sort of a spectrum in which you see different levels of urbanization, and बीच में आपके peripheral urban periphery भी आती है, peri-urban भी आती है, rural भी आता है. तो rural की definition भी बड़ी मर्जी किस्म की, and you always see this mix of different kinds of processes that are happening. So the interest is always in looking at these spatial variations and looking at like where you're seeing successes in development and where you're seeing, let's say, the most deprivation, and trying to understand why that is happening. So it's a city planning degree, but I wouldn't say my expertise is in cities so much. It's about understanding the communities कैसे बनती हैं.
But when do you come back to Pakistan? What happens then?
So I come back to Pakistan in end of 2017, something like that.
Not that long ago.
Sorry?
Not that long ago.
काफी अर्सा हो गया, 5 साल हो गए. इतना अर्सा में I would have wanted to be doing something else by now.
Okay.
हाँ. So no, I had come back and I thought कि मैं PhD के लिए apply करना चाहती हूँ, but I wasn't so sure about it. I was like देखते हैं, I'll make decide about it. But because I was thinking of a PhD kind of role, तो मैं research roles में जाना चाहती थी. So I kind of looked around and ended up back with the World Bank in a research project. So for the last few years, I've been working in different research roles, which development sector may, some work with the city government here, some other odd consultancies idhar udhar. So mostly in research roles looking at the urban and the rural.
Then when does the farming project start and why?
So one thing that I struggle with is that, like I said, I have trouble letting go of the urban or the rural, right? I don't want to pick. I feel the both are interrelated, और मैं दोनों के पास simultaneously काम करना चाहती हूँ. And one of the reasons I ended up joining the research project that I did is because उसमें दोनों के ऊपर काम हो रहा था. कुछ urban research के ऊपर भी काम हो रहा था और कुछ rural research के ऊपर भी काम हो रहा था. और मेरा जो thesis था वो actually agricultural irrigation की planning के ऊपर था. How the two departments talk to each other and how that planning can be.
Master's ka thesis.
Even in my
Master's ka thesis?
Master's ka thesis. Yeah. Okay. So even in my research, it was like the research itself was focused more on water and agriculture, even though my degree was in city planning. So when I came back, my interest was in being able to continue working on both. And so a few things. एक तो ये कि मैं एक प्रोजेक्ट पर काम करी थी जो कि पंजाब के एग्रीकल्चर डिपार्टमेंट के साथ था, and it was more of a governance project. It was looking at like how you can measure what kind of work agriculture extension workers do and develop systems to assign performance bonuses, things like that. So my work was of that nature. But whenever I'm working on something जिसका मुझे कुछ इतना पता नहीं हो, that makes me uncomfortable. Sounds like मैं ज़राअत के ऊपर काम तो कर रही हूँ, तो मुझे ज़राअत का सर पैर नहीं पता. So एक तो ये इंसेंटिव था कि अगर मैं जाके एक प्रोग्राम डिजाइन कर रही हूँ which is all about like acres and nehri pani and groundwater, I should at least have a sense of एकड़ कितना बड़ा होता है, किनाल कितना बड़ा होता है. I should have gone and like walked in the sun, मट्टी को हाथ लगाया और कोई गंदम की शक्ल पता हो. Like I should at least have a like visceral sense of what it means to be in agriculture. तो एक तो ये इंटरेस्ट था. दूसरा ये था कि because my personal interest is always in trying to focus on Pindi Islamabad and learning about that in a what I like to call a citizen planner kind of role, like a self-assigned citizen planner role. So I was also learning about planning here in Pindi Islamabad, and my village is an hour away from Pindi. मेरा गांव भी करीब नहीं है. And it's very peri-urban. उसके इर्द-गिर्द अच्छे बहरिया बन गए हैं. So it's sort of become an impact in the city. तो एक सवाल मेरे ज़हन में ये भी था कि I have a village which is a village. It's officially rural notified category. ठीक है, लेकिन उसकी पूरी इकोनॉमी साथ के शहर में चलती है, which is true for a lot of Pakistan, right? करीबों को बड़ा शहर है और इर्द-गिर्द के सारे गांव जो हैं डेली लोग कम्यूट करें, आ रहे हैं, जा रहे हैं, नौकरियां इधर ही कर रहे हैं और रहे गांव में रहे. And उसकी वजह ये है कि your agriculture is simply not paying off, right? I was listening to a talk on this and वो सुहेल साहब हैं, वो नंबर साइड कर रहे थे कि at the moment in Pakistan, the more than 60% of the rural incomes are coming from non-farm jobs. So our rural is largely not even agricultural. और उसकी वजह यही है कि your agriculture is simply not paying off. लेकिन जो आपका पेरी अर्बन है, जो शहर के करीब इलाके हैं, उनमें ये भी हो रहा है कि because they're close to the city, there's immense pressures on the land. आपने अब शहर में कहीं रहना है, आपको जमीन चाहिए, आप शहर के बीच में तो अफोर्ड नहीं कर सकते, तो अगर घंटे की ड्राइव के अंदर अंदर आपको जगह मिलती है, आप वहाँ जमीन लेके घर बना लेंगे. एंड सेम फॉर गाँव के अंदर लोग हैं, उनके बच्चे हो रहे हैं, उनकी शादियां हो रही है, उनको अपने घर चाहिए, उनकी अपनी जमीन है, तो वो क्या करेंगे कि वो जमीन पे घर बना लेंगे. सो देयर इज अ लॉट ऑफ ट्रांजैक्शंस हैपनिंग लाइक दैट. हमारे गाँव की जो शामिलात हैं वो बहरिया को बेची गई, बिकॉज शामिलात आर सॉर्ट ऑफ barren wasteland away from the center of the city. वो common land होता है. So that's easy money for the people. They're like हम उसको यूज भी नहीं कर रहे, वो खाली जमीन भी पड़ी है, हमें फ्री का पैसा मिल जाए, बेच दो. So एक तो उस तरह की ट्रांजैक्शन हो रही है. हाउसिंग सोसाइटीज को लोग अपने गांव की जमीनें बेच रहे हैं, they're making some quick bucks out of it and they're using that to make assets, send kids to education, build a house, whatever. So there's a lot of demand. या फिर within the village transactions हो रही हैं. एक ने दूसरे से जमीन ले ली और वहाँ पे अपना घर बना लिया, अपने बच्चों का घर बना लिया. So there's a lot of like the whole village market, land market is getting active in cities or in areas around the cities. So the question I had was कि ये जो मेरे गांव की जमीन है ना, ये 2.5 लाख मरला बिक रही है घर बनाने के लिए, स्पेशली अगर उसको रोड से कोई कनेक्शन है. इस वजह से लोग यहाँ पर ज़राअत तो ज्यादा नहीं करते, एटमोस्ट गंदम लगा लेते हैं. तो can we show or demonstrate a successful model of agriculture that will actually produce enough income that the best use of this land stops being कि इसको बेच के real estate में convert कर? Is that a possibility? And that's the fundamental question that I'm coming from. And उसके दो aspects हैं. एक तो ये है कि what's the best use of this land? Right?
Yeah.
The question of लोगों ने कहीं रहना भी है, लोगों ने कहीं फूड भी उगाना है, लोगों ने कहीं से इनकम भी बनानी है. We are in a banani area. Banani इलाकों में land holding size are smaller than what you would see in हरी इलाके. गांव भी छोटे होते हैं, land holding size.
अच्छा, just to help my burger self, ये जरा explainers भी डाल दो. What is barani? What is
sorry,
Nehri?
jargon should be avoided. So barani is game fetch. This is ये सब हिमालयस के प्लेटू हैं या uneven lands हैं. यहाँ पर irrigation infrastructure नहीं है. sort of like छोटे-छोटे terraced किस्म के खेत हैं.
Steps.
हाँ, steps के, but like not like you would see in Kashmir. Not like that. इतना uneven नहीं है. लेकिन मतलब इतने बड़े-बड़े खेत भी नहीं. You don't see acres upon acres of flat land. छोटे-छोटे 3-3 किनाल के खेत भी होंगे, 8-8 किनाल के खेत भी होंगे. या 7 किनाल के, 8 किनाल के.
Sure.
So we are rain fed. We are completely reliant on the rain, and that's one of the reasons that productive agriculture here is very difficult because you don't have control over water. However, यहाँ पे we are semi-arid. As you go south, arid होता चला जाता है. So we actually get quite a bit of rain. तो 40 से 50 इंच जो है हमारे साल की बारिश होती है. which in theory should be able to support anything you want to grow, given that you can control the timing of that rain. अगर आपकी मर्जी के वक्त पे बारिश हो जाए फिर तो आप यहाँ कुछ भी उगा सकते हैं. लेकिन we are a monsoon country, तो most of this rain is concentrated monsoon के महीने में, बाकी महीनों में बहुत थोड़ी थोड़ी होती है, और फिर जब आपने बीज लगाया तब नहीं होती, या जब आपकी गंदम को बहुत सख्त जरूरत है उस वक्त नहीं होती. And so that timing of the rain and being able to understand those variations is extremely key to be able to do agriculture here. And one of the reasons that agriculture here isn't so dominant is because आपके पास water control नहीं है. And so you're constantly facing huge risks. आप पूरी फसल लगा ले बारिश में और you're screwed and you're getting no income out of it. And so that's one of the reasons that this is not sort of a big agricultural region. So to go back to the original question, क्या आपके 2-3 challenges हैं. One being ये real estate बड़ी valuable है, आपकी सारी जमीन तेजी से real estate बन रही है, and we are sort of, I'm assuming, are aware of उसके क्या मसाइल हैं. शहर फैलते चले जा रहे हैं, घर बनते चले जा रहे हैं, उसका प्रोडक्टिव यूज नहीं है, वगैरह वगैरह. The second is कि what is the best use of the land? Can you put the land to productive use where it then becomes a source of income? Because unemployment is a big issue everywhere, शहरों के अंदर, गाँव के अंदर, especially for youth. And the third is, can this best use be agriculture? Can you figure out a model of agriculture, given that we are an agricultural country, that's where our most of skill sets sort of comes, या जिसके साथ सबसे ज़्यादा familiarity है, या जो resources हमारे पास available हैं वो agriculture से related हैं. तो क्या आप कोई इस जमीन का ऐसा ज़राई मॉडल डेवलप कर सकते हैं कि it becomes an employer, it becomes a net positive, it becomes a way of mobilizing the economy of the area, and that hopefully can then answer the question of what should be the rural economy model of Pakistan, जिसका अभी तक मुझे कोई खास जवाब नहीं मिला. And so I love this problem because it's sitting at that nexus of the urban and the rural, right? You're dealing with all of these problems. So yes, that's a very long answer to the question of.
No, it's great. It's great. I wonder why. I suppose a basic question to ask, which you might have already answered in some ways, but इसको अगर हम combine करना चाहें, condense करना चाहें, why do you think knowing this is important? Like figuring out the best use of land, because clearly one of the things is that you think it's not being utilized in the best way currently, right? Because if it is, तो फिर तो मसला ही नहीं है कोई. But so the problem is that you feel that the land around Pindi specifically for now, but also I'm sure other areas, is not being utilized in the most ideal manner, right? Which means that there are some problems that you are seeing with the current utilization.
There's a question before the land question, right? Before the land question is your fundamental question of how to structure our societies. हमारे शहर और हमारे गांव, ठीक है? The goal being that they should be structured in a manner where people are able to realize their potential, and people are going to be able to realize their potential अगर उनके पास घर हो, उनके पास पढ़ाई के मौके हो, उनके पास नौकरियां हो. So that's sort of the broader context within which I'm working, and because I'm so invested in the spatial, the land is important because all of this interaction between these different sectors is happening on a piece of land. ठीक है? ये सब जो भी interaction हो रही है ना, वो किसी जमीन के टुकड़े के ऊपर हो रही है. कि वो गांव के अंदर होगा, वो शहर के अंदर होगा, इसके ऊपर घर बनेगा या इसके ऊपर कोई फैक्ट्री बनेगी या इसके ऊपर पार्क बनेगा या इसके ऊपर ज़राअत होगी. All of that is happening on a piece of land. So for me, the land framework helps me think about or helps me ground the question, because instead of saying कि पाकिस्तान की इकोनॉमी के मसाइल का क्या हल है, which is a very big question, your question becomes situated in a place of कि ये जो इस इलाके की जमीन है, what are the best uses of that land to achieve those goals? कि इसी जमीन के ऊपर आपने कुछ इकोनॉमी के हल भी निकालने हैं, आपने कोई एमिनिटीज भी क्रिएट करनी है, आपने घर भी बनाने हैं, आपने एक पॉसिबिलिटी क्रिएट करनी है of allowing a vibrant community to develop here. And so the piece of land allows me to focus my energies on a particular place where then all of these things are interacting, right? My economy भी आ रही है, society भी आ रही है, rural urban conflicts भी आ रहे हैं, and so that helps me situate the problem in a specific place.
Yeah. It's it's like a lens for you to focus the big issue of, mustaqbil ke masle into like achievable sort of context, or
into
at
a
least
focus place. Yeah.
हाँ
But
हाँ
it's also interesting because contestations on land become like unravel all of these issues.
yeah
आप किसी भी
yeah
जगह की जमीन उठा लें और उसके डायनामिक्स समझना शुरू कर दें तो ये सब चीजें सामने आ जाती हैं because
yeah
all of these interactions, these contestations are happening on that piece of land. So it's
Hmm.
also a way for unraveling these different dynamics that are
yeah
sort of become visible as you work in a place.
okay. So फिर how did you start the farming project?
So then I was investigating and looking at, just trying to understand the agricultural landscape. Especially when you work with the agriculture department, now आपकी सारी focuses irrigated areas पे होती हैं because they are the larger bread basket and a lot more agriculture departments have faced that way. So immediately you start with the question of कि हमारे इलाके में इस तरह की ज़राअत क्यों नहीं हुई है? What's the difference? And of course, one immediate answer is because it's rain-fed. You don't have water here. So just trying to understand, what are the pitfalls. मेरे खानदान के लोग पहले ज़राअत करते रहे हैं, फिर उन्होंने छोड़ दी है. So going and speaking to them, why did you leave? What did you plant? How did you do it? And then there's certain things that we sort of understand about agriculture. Okay, for example, in its current model, it's just not very profitable. You're not going to make a lot of money out of it. क्योंकि आपकी soils pretty degraded हो गई हैं, पानी बहुत reliable नहीं है, आपकी inputs की इतनी ज़्यादा requirements हैं कि जो आपकी yield निकलती है उसमें पर एकड़ profits बड़े limited हैं और low value किस्म की आप गंदम किस्म की चीजें लगा रहे हैं. So we're kind of aware of these big problems. And so one thing that I didn't want to do is to just try and do what everyone is doing. Because
what is everyone doing?
जिस तरह जैसे हमारे इलाके में गंदम लग रही है, अब गंदम की कैसे लग रही है जी, वो जाके हल चलाते हैं, वो खाद लाते हैं. हाँ, it's like a very time tested way of doing things.
Right, because उसके तो results सामने हैं, जो भी हैं, जैसे भी हैं.
सामने है कि हमें ये नजर आ रहा है कि लोगों ने या तो छोड़ दिया है या उसको जमीन को ठेके पे दे दिया, वो जो ठेके पे लगा रहा है वो भी बस इतनी लगा रहा है कि उसकी अपनी गंदम आ जाए, वो उसे इनकम नहीं बना रहा है. ऐसा सब सप्लीमेंट्री सोर्स ऑफ इनकम होगी या अपने सब्सिस्टेंस के लिए इस्तेमाल कर रहा है. So my first thought was कि no point in trying to replicate what others have done. They've done it better than me. I have no prior experience. उनसे बेहतर तो नहीं कर सकती. तो 5 साल करने के बाद मुझे ये पता चल जाएगा कि उन्होंने क्यों छोड़ दिया है, लेकिन मुझे मतलब कुछ फायदा नहीं होगा. So I was exploring around, and then because of my interest in city planning, a lot of this conversation is also connected with how a lot of the way we're doing things, जिस तरह हम land use करते हैं, जिस तरह हम घर बना रहे हैं, जिस तरह हम transportation करते हैं, जिस तरह हम ज़राअत करते हैं, it's all negatively impacting the environment. The environment is in return negatively impacting our land, and this is not sustainable. And that was also a concern, like it's sort of a piece of the puzzle for me is, are there more sustainable models that we can look at that will give me better agricultural results, but simultaneously also contribute to, fighting climate change or having a more sustainable environment. तो फिर immediately आप regenerative agriculture के ऊपर आ जाते हैं, उसके ऊपर काफी research वगैरह हो रही है.
What is that?
The issue. So regenerative agriculture is basically trying to do agriculture in a manner where you are simultaneously developing the soil and improving the ecosystem. So the idea being कि soil is a living being. और अगर आपकी soil healthy होगी तो फिर आपके output भी अच्छा होगा. But the way we do agriculture currently completely destroys it.
Yeah.
And so because your current model of agriculture completely destroys it, तो आपको फिर synthetic inputs डाल के उसको make up करना पड़ता है. It's a vicious cycle over time. And there are predictions now which say कि in like 40 years we would have lost 40% of our like global food production. We are sort of seeing massive degradation of the environment and massive food security issues going forward. And so there's a big push for regenerative agriculture which says, let's go back to methods that are closer to how nature works, which builds up our soil, builds up the ecosystem.
Yeah.
You can start fighting some of these degradation impacts that we're seeing. मसला ये है कि अब इस तरह का बहुत सारा काम जो है वो अमेरिका जैसी जगहों के ऊपर हो रहा है, which has a completely different landscape, completely different environment, different levels of resources. वहाँ पे साल में 3 महीने जमीन जमी रहती है, उनका एक बिल्कुल मुख्तलिफ तरीका है. हम वी आर डीलिंग विद 45 डिग्री टेम्परेचर्स, बट ऑल्सो वहाँ पे लोगों के पास 1000 एकड़ जमीन होती है. मेरे पास यहाँ 4 एकड़ जमीन है. So you know the way you do things also varies completely. So I was struggling with अच्छा principles तो समझ आ गए, करूँ कैसे. And then I kind of ran into this group. It's called Picnic. पायदार कुदरत निज़ाम काश्तकारी.
Wow.
You may have seen me talk about it on Twitter. But basically, there's an agriculturist here, Lahore based, Asif Sharif Sahab. And I sort of stumbled on his Facebook page. उस वक्त पैदावार नाम था उसका. And he had laid down like a very simplified version of आइए आप हमारे सिस्टम के ऊपर काम करें, इससे आपका सिस्टम भी improve होगा और you will get better yields. And the principles that he laid on are very similar to other regenerative principles that I was seeing. So suddenly I had a model of someone saying, this is how you do it. This is how you do it in Pakistan. And I was like, oh, I can test this out. Right? And the sales pitch is lovely. The sales pitch is, आप ये 4 principles follow करें, आपके inputs कम लगेंगे, आपका machinery use कम होगा, बीज कम इस्तेमाल होगा, आप synthetic fertilizer भी नहीं डालेंगे, आपको पानी भी कम चाहिए और आपकी yield ज़्यादा आएगी. And therefore, you cut your input costs, you're getting greater output, and immediately the equation changes. Suddenly, you're making money off of agriculture. जो अभी तक break even हो रहा था या बहुत थोड़ा आपको मुनाफा आ रहा था. And so that's the theory of it. So I got in touch with him. He's very helpful. He's very helpful to this day. मुर्शद है हमारे. तो मैं उनको तंग करती रहती हूँ. मैं बीज लगाया निकला नहीं, क्या करूँ? Like आपने ठीक नहीं लगाया होगा. Like हाँ, probably likely कि मैंने ठीक नहीं लगाया होगा. But yes, so that gave me, basic questions like कौन सा बीज लगाएं, कब लगाएं, किस मशीन से लगाएं, कटिंग कैसे हो, things like mulch कैसे arrange होनी है. So all of those questions immediately became answerable. And then he has a whole bunch of WhatsApp groups, so I joined in. So there were other people who were doing it that I could ask for help. But आहिस्ता करते करते Twitter पे रोला डालते डालते now I know a few farmers who are actually doing it in Barani region. So I can ask for help, and they know the system, they know everything very well, so they're able to guide me. So that gave me a template, like a blueprint for me to get started. And so that's how I actually eventually ended up getting started.
Okay. And how, agla sawal, how's the experience been so far? 3 years it's been?
2 साल.
2 साल. Okay.
इस जून में 2 साल पहले हम पहली दफा फेंस लगा के ना मूंगफली लगाई थी, which was our very very first, like just getting started. पहले झटका लगा था because I was like, fence लगानी पड़ेगी. Like I had started out and I had done a basic.
Why did you need a fence?
I'll mention that. So I had done a basic math कि अच्छा मतलब मैं इतने के बीज लूंगी, बीज तो इतने महंगे नहीं है, 3-4 हज़ार की बोरी आ जाएगी. अच्छा खाद तो हम डाल नहीं रहे हो तो खर्चा खत्म हो गया. कोई एक आध मशीनरी खरीदनी पड़ेगी, बेड मेकर खरीदना पड़ेगा, ठीक है 1-2 लाख का वो आ जाएगा. So I made an estimate. I was like, मुझे 1 साल के लिए 5-6 लाख चाहिए. चलो ठीक है, मैनेज हो जाएगा, कर लेंगे इतना, तो we'll see. So फिर इनकम आनी शुरू हो जाएगी. Very ambitious plan. थोड़ी तो आएगी ना, मतलब नहीं प्रॉफिट नहीं. I wasn't so ambitious. I was like time लगेगा. Because one of the things that the moment you study about regenerative agriculture, the first thing they'll tell you is कि transition बड़ी मुश्किल है. Going from a conventional system to a regenerative system takes time. Because you've completely depleted your soil. उसको अब दोबारा build up करने में वक्त लगेगा. So I wasn't like हाँ बस एक दिन में हम golden हो जाएंगे. Even though Ayesha Shahid was like.
Before this, there's also a question that I forgot to ask. ज़मीन कहाँ से आई?
So ज़मीन because हमारा गाँव है. So we have some land in the family. And because as I mentioned, आहिस्ता आहिस्ता agriculture से रुझान हट रहा है, तो कुछ ज़मीनें तो बैठी हुई थी. Like they were of poor quality, nothing was being cultivated there. So my family was like, हाँ जो करना है करो, याशी करो. And then some land we leased from like another family member.
अच्छा, okay.
So we are on 5 acres now, जिसमें तकरीबन आधी leased है, आधी हमारी खानदान की है. तो इसलिए मैं अपने चाचा को कोई पैसे नहीं दे रही. I'm like जब कुछ return होगा तो फिर हम we can talk.
Yeah. Or चाचा is also not looking to sell to Bahria Down 8 or something फिलहाल. Like that's not a.
No. अभी वो थोड़ा एक locational difference है. It's not in a place where it can be sold, but it very quickly, मतलब there's a road coming, so it will very quickly become very very valuable. But अभी वो तो ऐसा पड़ा है ना, मैं तो नहीं बेच रही.
हाँ अच्छा, अभी मैं तुम्हें अभी से बता रहा हूँ कि I feel like जितनी तुमने बातें की है ना, we're going to be doing like a lot of podcasts. ठीक है तो अभी से तुम mentally सोच लो because all of this is like extremely interesting. अच्छा खैर तो तुमने going back to the thing 5-6 लाख का खर्चा होगा and
तो मैंने एक
eventually
बेसिक बात की है, मैंने बजटिंग की, मैंने कहा चलो ठीक है इतने तो मैं निकाल सकती हूँ, अपने जॉब से निकल आएंगे ये वो, एंड देन आई वेंट इन एंड द फर्स्ट थिंग पीपल वर लाइक नहीं यहाँ तो बाढ़ लगानी पड़ेगी, एंड आई एम लाइक अच्छा चलो ठीक है बाढ़ लगा लेते हैं, बाढ़ का कितना खर्चा आएगा, 2-3 लाख तो आएगा because it's really expensive. Immediately my budget was screwed. I was like oh अच्छा चलो ठीक है we can use खर्चा. So you need a fence because the current model of agriculture in our village and in a lot of Port Valley villages is कि it's single season agriculture. आप सर्दी में गंदम लगाते हैं, ठीक है, उसके बाद गर्मियों में आपने फैलो छोड़ा होता है और उसमें फिर आप तकरीबन once a month हल चलाते हैं. You plow it because obviously जब फैलो जमीन है तो फिर उसके ऊपर जड़ी बूटियां उगती हैं, and there's also a belief that when you plow it, it helps absorption of water.
Sure.
So once a month roughly you're plowing the land in the summers and then in the winters you're planting wheat. In some cases, in areas close to the village, लोग मकई भी लगाते हैं मानसून में, या ज्वार बाजरा लगाएंगे पर वो बहुत कम हो गया, मकई लगती है चारे के तौर पर. And so there's an understanding in the village कि summer is open season for animals. तो लोग जो अपनी गाय बकरियां वगैरह है ना वो सब खोल देते हैं, and so any place is fair game for them. वो आएंगे वो चारा काट लेंगे. In fact आज मैं उससे खेत से होके आई हूँ, हमने मूंग लगाई हुई थी, and one thing that was sort of growing reasonably well, and our farm manager उनको कल किसी जनाजे पे जाना पड़ गया. He left for a few hours और एक पौधा नहीं छोड़ा उन बकरियों ने. All the फलियां are gone. It's all been eaten alive, and I was just like, oh, what do I do? 2 साल तक बकरियों से जंग कर रहे हैं, नाकामयाब नहीं हो रही. So this is why you need a fence. तो अभी हमने फेंस लगाई हुई है. The issue is कि वो जो फेंस होती है ना जिसमें तार लगी होती है,
the barbed wire fence.
हाँ, that will stop the गाय भैंसे. It will not stop the बकरी. The बकरी is like a freaking चूहा. वो बिल्कुल कोलैप्स होके छोटे साइज से होके ना नीचे से गुजर के आ जाती है.
Really?
Yeah. It's possible to stop the बकरियां. So we have a guy that we've hired जो उधर ही होते हैं, तो हमने उनकी जिम्मेदारी लगाई हुई है. But he can't be there 100% of the time ना, तो it gets difficult. So I'm now thinking of upgrading the fence. But the reason we use this one is because दूसरी वाली वो जो complete coverage वाली होती है, it's like a net वाली शक्ल में, that would be like double the खर्चा. And I was like, I will probably not be making any money of this operation, so मैं अभी इतना खर्चा नहीं करना चाहती. So at that time I hadn't. And now since we've been making a loss for 2 years, I even less want to spend more money on a fence. But I'm like, मैं नहीं भी करूँगी तो फिर मतलब I'm not going to make any profit because बकरियां सब खा जाती हैं. So it's a balancing act. But yes, that's why we had to fence. But that's the other piece of the puzzle is that like agriculture is a communal activity, right? There are a lot of decisions that have been made at the village level, and if you try and go against that, it becomes very difficult. You run into problems like these. कि लोगों ने तो गाय बकरियां खुलनी है और आप उनको जाके नहीं कह सकते कि तुम्हारी बकरी ने मेरे पौधे क्यों खाए, because there's a communal decision कि गर्मियों में it's fair game. अब अगर आपने गर्मियों में फसल लगाई है तो आपकी जिम्मेदारी है उसको संभालना, आप बकरी वाले को जाके नहीं कह सकते.
हाँ, तो देन एक सवाल फिर ये है कि आपने गर्मी में फसल क्यों लगाई, बट बिफोर दैट व्हाट वर यू प्लानिंग के गंदम तो लगता है ना गांव में, राइट, सर्दियों में. सो दैट्स द एग्जांपल दैट यू आर थिंकिंग के दिस इज समथिंग दैट इज ट्राइड एंड टेस्टेड एंड पॉजिटिव नेगेटिव्स उसके पता है. सो यू आर नॉट गोइंग टू गो आउट द गंदम वे. What did you plant? कितने cycles गुजरे हैं and what was the success failure situation शुरू से लेके अब तक?
हाँ, so we've had 4 cycles. And initially our thought was कि we keep doing what the people in the village are doing. कहते हम गंदम लगाते रहे, क्योंकि we've suddenly transitioned to a system जहाँ हम कोई input नहीं दे रहे soil को या इतनी support नहीं दे रहे जितनी पहले थी. हमने हल चलाना भी छोड़ दिया है. पहले जहाँ हर महीने एक दफा हल चलता था, we've stopped doing that. So immediately the soil is really poor in quality at the moment. हमने organic content के टेस्ट कराए तो सब under 0.5% था. And general understanding, so all of Punjab, the soil organic matter is 0.5%. And they say कि अगर 0.5% से कम आपका soil organic matter है तो आपकी मिट्टी जो है वो सहरा की मिट्टी के बराबर है. It's that poor and depleted. And the amount of organic content is an indicator of कितने न्यूट्रिएंट आपकी मिट्टी के अंदर जो है ना वो plant के available form के अंदर है.
Yeah.
So soil has all the nutrients it needs, but they may not be in a form that the plant can use.
Yeah.
लेकिन जब उसके अंदर ज़्यादा organic matter होता है, the plant can do it.
Yeah.
And higher organic matter also means that your soil will be more soft, it'll be more porous, it's able to hold a lot more moisture, so then it's also more resilient to variations in rainfall. अगर वो स्टोर कर सकती है और एब्जॉर्ब भी कर सकती है, तो अगर बारिश नहीं भी हो तो आप गुजारा करेंगे.
Yeah.
So we have poor soil with really poor organic content, जहाँ पर पहले लोग उसको सप्लीमेंट करते थे हल चलाकर और बहुत सारी खाद डालकर. अब हमने वो दोनों चीजें छोड़ दी. And so obviously we are not giving our plant any chance. So we don't want to go and do something really exotic and fancy. हम जाके करेला नहीं लगाना चाहते वहाँ पर. हम ये देख रहे हैं कि जितनी गांव वाले गंदम कर रहे हैं, क्या हम उतनी गंदम भी कर सकते हैं, यानी अगर वो भी कर ली तो बड़ी कामयाबी. So एक तो ये था कि the gandum we didn't want to challenge too much. And there's options like गंदम की जगह सरसों लगा लो if you want to experiment. वो मतलब लोग थोड़ा बहुत तो बदलते हैं, इतनी वेरिएशन तो होती है. But गर्मियों में कोई इतना क्लियर मॉडल नहीं था. And we had many different options. तो उसमें भी we were looking for rugged, water resistant किस्म की चीजें हैं जो बहुत high input ना मांगती हो. Rugged, water resistant किस्म की चीजें. So pulses were a easy answer that people were suggesting कि आप मूंग, लोबिया इस तरह की चीजें लगा लें. And so we thought we would try that. And so for the last 2 years, we've sort of been experimenting a lot because it's also we don't have experience from others to know कि क्या चीज अच्छा करेगी, क्योंकि लोग नहीं लगा रहे. They are not able to tell you कि ये बहुत अच्छी होती है. And if you go and ask कि अच्छा जी यहाँ पर चने लगते थे, हाँ हमारे बचपन में लगते थे. मूंग लगती थी, हाँ जी लगती थी. फिर लोग बताते हैं बचपन में तो कपास भी लगती थी, गांव में लोग अपना कपड़ा बनाते थे, which is sort of unimaginable in our rain-fed area. मतलब मैंने कभी नहीं सुना कि यहाँ कपास.
Because cotton needs a lot of water.
Cotton needs a lot of water. But लगती थी, मतलब हमारे यहाँ कपड़े बनाने वाले लोग होते थे. The village was completely self-contained unit. Everything was made right there. It was grown. So there's.
अच्छा, sorry, एक और बात ये थी, खाद ना डालना, I understand will be part of your regenerative sort of perspective. हल ना चलाना is also part of it, कि the soil will just take care of itself.
That's sort of like the big principle. Yeah. That's the biggest principle is you stop tilling.
अच्छा.
Because the soil is sort of like a living organism. It has its own structure. उसके अंदर सारे fungi grow करें, organic content है, उसके ऊपर bacteria grow करें, जो nematodes को support करें. It's this whole entire structure. And so the moment you till it, you're pulverizing it, you're destroying that entire structure. आप पूरे ecosystem को खत्म कर देते हैं. So that's sort of the big principle is you stop tilling the soil.
Don't mess with the soil. हाँ, ठीक है.
Don't mess with the soil.
अच्छा.
फिर उसके मुश्किलात हैं, वो whole transition puzzle comes up. So पहली गर्मियों में लोगों ने कहा कि अच्छा, the other reason we wanted to try a lot of different crops is because हर फसल की बिजाई का तरीका फर्क होगा, right? क्योंकि अब seed size are different, so we have to learn that. फिर उसकी growth period कितना है, उसको पानी कितना चाहिए, फिर हर खेत की soil भी different है. So even within our 4-5 acres, कौन सी जगह किस तरह की फसल के लिए suitable है, वो भी हमने सीखना है. And then there's a lot of advice that's being given to us. Now, आप ये भी लगा लें, आप वो भी लगा लें. So we also trying to figure out which one actually works for us. So we were sort of in this experimental mode. We were like, सब बारी try करते हैं, we'll see what happens. So we started with मूंगफली. मूंगफली is a safe bet कि इसको बहुत पानी नहीं चाहिए होता. हमारे इलाके में लगती है. हमारी कुछ जमीनें काफी रेतली हैं. So for रेतली जमीनें they're considered suitable and people consider it really valuable. They're like ये बहुत it's like the gold, बरानी gold ना, मूंगफली लगा ले तो बहुत मुनाफा हो जाएगा. इशू क्या है जी कि मूंगफली मैनुअली लगती है, यानी कि लगाने के लिए आपको बहुत लेबर हायर करना है और फिर निकलती भी मैनुअली है, फिर उसकी थ्रेशिंग भी मैनुअली होती है, तो very labor intensive.
In Pakistan या like globally as well?
In Pakistan.
Right.
In Pakistan. अभी भी पाकिस्तान में मशीनें आने शुरू हो गई है. अभी तक हमारी जो एक सक्सेस थी वो यही थी कि हमने मूंगफली लगा ली, हमने कहा ठीक है हम पैसा दे देंगे, हम लेबर हायर कर लेंगे. And that's the other thing. The moment you start agriculture here, the first thing people will tell you is कि लेबर नहीं है, आपको यहाँ मजदूर नहीं मिलेगा. And that's one of the biggest challenges is that even if you're willing to pay money, people are not willing to do agricultural work because there's better options. It doesn't pay so well because जाके construction का ठेका उठा लेंगे, वो उनको 40 दिन का घर का मिल जाएगा compared to मैं उनको 2 दिन के लिए hire करूँगी. They don't want to do that. So labor is a big challenge, but we didn't quite realize it. We were like, हाँ बस ठीक है, we'll spend money, we
Yeah.
will get the labor. We had a previous farm manager at the time. हमारे गांव में कुछ in migration भी है. There are people who are from the ex-Sparta के भी इलाके जब वहाँ पे ज्यादा conflict वगैरह होता है, so there are people who migrated here because we are close enough. तो कुछ वो families भी हैं. True to their reputation, our experience with Pathans is that they're very good with manual labor and they're very good with networks. तो वो हमारे थे, पहले हमने उनको एक रखा हुआ था हमारे खेत के ऊपर, तो he was very well connected कि हम अगर उनको कहते थे कि labor ले आओ, he had been doing a lot of construction work, so he had that network where he would 3-4 बंदे वो पकड़ के ले आते थे. So we were able to sow the मूंगफली and it did reasonably well and we were able to harvest it. फिर हम लगा रहे थे, हमारे साथ कुछ और लोगों ने भी लगाया, तो इतना इलाका हो गया कि some of the machinery providers actually brought a peanut digger. तो उसके digging के लिए we were able to mechanize that operation, which had not happened until now. तो वो एक success था कि there was enough volume of people planting मूंगफली for the first time in our village कि वो machinery provider आ गया and we were able to dig it out. और I've heard उसके बाद थ्रेशर भी अब आ गए हैं, so now even that doesn't have to be manual. वो हमें मैनुअली करनी पड़ी थी. तो पिकिंग ऑफ द मूंगफली मतलब पौधा तो आपने निकाला ना, उसके बाद मूंगफली को उतारना है तो वो मैनुअली किया था. So वो उस वक्त that was our first फसल and we were thinking कुछ भी नहीं होगा, हम लगाते लगाते भी बड़े लेट हो गए, तो अभी हम preparation stage में थे. वो we got some output. We were like बस ठीक है, शाबाश, जबरदस्त, first attempt, new crop, other people have planted it, well done.
Yeah.
लेकिन we decided कि हम दोबारा नहीं लगाएंगे because the digging of the मूंगफली causes a lot of disturbance to the soil and we are trying to go to a no-till system. तो हमने कहा कि अभी जब तक हमारी soil अच्छी से develop नहीं होती, we will avoid doing more मूंगफली. तो उसके बाद हमने मूंगफली try नहीं की. Then next winter आ गई, so winter में we did गंदम and जौंतरी. जो चारे की फसलें हैं, जौंतरी, मकई, इस तरह की चीजें, they basically fodder crops for animals. They are recommended a lot because हमारे यहाँ सर्दियों में चारे की शॉर्टेज हो जाती है and because land holdings are small, all over Pakistan in general, livestock is sort of more profitable than trying to do crop farming. तो हर घर में 1-2 जानवर लोगों ने तकरीबन रखे हैं, especially among the lower income segments. तो चारा is valuable. अगर आप चारा उगाएं तो आप उसको बेच सकते हैं. So people would always say कि आप चारा लगा लें. So we tried some चारे की फसलें. थोड़े से इलाके में we tried लहसुन हमने ट्राई की, मसूर लगाई. We tried so many things. गवारा ट्राई किया. As a cover, we've been planting jantar. Jantar is a green manuring crop. It's nitrogen fixing. It's supposed to be pretty rugged. आमतौर पे लोग लगाते हैं उसको to increase biomass. तो soil का organic content बढ़ाना होता है, जंतर लगा लेते हैं, वो तेजी से उगती है. It's like this big flowing fields. और फिर आप उसको रोटावेट कर देते हैं. You bury it in your soil. Like these blades, पूरा उसको ना बिल्कुल काट के mix कर देते हैं. And so we are not trying to do that. तो हम उसको वहीं काट के उधर ही लटा देते हैं. So और क्या हमने ट्राई किया? Tried so many, मतलब 12-14 फसलें तो हम 4 सीजन में ट्राई कर चुके हैं. We tried like जौ लगाई, रोपिया I mentioned, and then in one field we've tried planting orchards. थोड़े से हमने फलों के दरख्त लगाए to experiment कि which one does better or which one is able to survive. As sort of a learning experience for us. So we've been experimenting with all of these. कुछ हमने covers के तौर पर लगाई और कुछ with the possibility of making some money out of it. But in general, over the 2 years, what we've seen is it's been a very consistent downhill trend. मतलब पहले 1-2 सीजन में फिर कुछ आउटपुट हो जाता था, कुछ निकल जाता था, या एटलीस्ट ये था कि हम जो भी चीज भी लगाते, it would at least germinate and then we would see it grow and then we would see कि बारिश नहीं हो रही है और हमारे पौधे सूख रहे हैं और वो फिर उनकी डेवलपमेंट स्लो हो गई या आउटपुट अच्छा नहीं निकला. But since the last season, like going on a year and a half to 2 years of no-till, what we've been seeing is that germination has been really poor.
Okay.
और उसकी 2-3 वजूहात सामने हैं. There's a whole kushti that we did with machinery that I can talk about later also. There's a methodology difficulties that we're figuring out. लेकिन एक तो ये है कि वन ऑफ द प्रिंसिपल्स ऑफ पिकनिक एज वी फॉलो अंडर आसिफ शरीफ साहब और जो रिजेनरेटिव सिस्टम में भी रिकमेंडेड है वो ये है कि आप कभी भी जमीन को नंगा ना छोड़ें. There should always be a thick layer of mulch covering it of organic content.
Sure.
And so what we've been trying to do is कि पहले आप कोई कवर क्रॉप लगाते हैं, आपने जंतर लगाई, वो सॉइल को इम्प्रूव करिए, नाइट्रोजन फिक्स करिए, बायोमास बढ़ा रही है, फिर आपने किसी मशीन से उसको उधर ही लिटा दिया, ठीक है, you sort of terminate the crop, you leave it there as cover, and then you plant the next crop in the middle of that. Now, the machinery for that does not exist in Pakistan. And one of the things that Asif Sharif Saab is working on is trying to develop seeders that or planters that are able to work in this kind of environment in a cheap manner. मतलब इस तरह की बहुत जबरदस्त इलेक्ट्रॉनिक सॉफ्टवेयर ड्रिवन मशीनरी एग्जिस्ट करती है अमेरिका के अंदर, वो $70,000 की मशीनें होंगी, बट नथिंग अफोर्डेबल दैट एग्जिस्ट फॉर आवर फॉर्म साइज इन आवर पर्टिकुलर context and environment. And so he's developed some models which have some success, some failures. लेकिन वो भी 4 लाख की मशीन थी और उस वक्त डेवलपमेंट में थी, and he's like आप ले लेना, I'm like मैं अभी नहीं कर सकती, let us try other things. So we bought like a simple zero tillage seeder जो कि आम मिलता है यहाँ पर, but it cannot plant in mulch. अगर thick residue हो तो बिल्कुल उसके अंदर plant नहीं कर सकता. तो एक तो वजह ये थी कि we were actually able to grow a thick residue. हमने जंतर लगाई, we got a crimper made, which is a machine, it's like a big roller with blades on it. So you run it and it kills the crop और उधर ही उसको लटा देता है. And then we use the seeder to plant within it. So then I got some soil scientists to come and visit my farm. I was like, क्या मसला हुआ, क्यों नहीं गंदम निकली? And they were like, hey, when you have such thick residue, तो अच्छा seed soil contact नहीं होगा, तो फिर आपकी गंदम नहीं निकलेगी. चलो ठीक है, जहाँ पर हमने सीडर इस्तेमाल किया वहां तो आई अंडरस्टैंड, बट देयर वर प्लेसेस जहाँ हमने ना प्रिसीजन सीडिंग की मैनुअल से, लाइक अ पंचर मशीन, तो 9 इंच के ऊपर वी वर ट्राइंग आउट समथिंग कॉल्ड अ सिस्टम ऑफ बीट इंटेंसिफिकेशन, एंड वी कैन टॉक अबाउट दैट सेपरेटली. लेकिन वो 9 इंच के ऊपर आप ना बिल्कुल प्रिसीजन सीडिंग से लगाते हैं, वो हमने मैनुअली लगाया, लाइक वी गॉट आवर फार्म लेबर, उनको मशीन दी, उनको हमने एक स्टेंसिल सा बना के दिया जिसमें डब्बे डब्बे थे, हर डब्बे के बीच में आपने एक दाना लगा दिया. सो देयर वर areas where we had done sowing like that, so there the seeder wasn't the issue, वहाँ पे germination भी बहुत अच्छी नहीं हुई, and वहाँ पे it seems that what's happened is basically what I've read in the literature is कि when you transition from a conventional system to a regenerative system, एक fertility dip आता है, क्योंकि पहले साल में तो there are still leftovers of the previous system, यहाँ पर अभी नमी है, अभी खाद के effect भी है, so we were sort of surviving on that, कुछ हमें result नजर आ रहा था. But by second year, all of that is gone now. वो कोई remnants थे वो नहीं रहे, पर आपकी soil भी अभी develop नहीं हुई, and so you're sort of in the worst dip phase of your recovery process. So it seems that the other part of the puzzle is that our soil right now is so poor that it's not able to hold enough moisture to वो seed को germinate करने दे. So basically for 4 seasons we are trying to meet these 4 conditions जो आसिफ शरीफ साहब ने हमें दी. 4 कंडीशंस क्या है कि आप जमीन पे हल ना चलाएं, ठीक है, आप जो भी प्लांट करें आप रेज्ड बेड्स के ऊपर प्लांट करें, यानी बीच में नालियां बनी हो और रेज्ड बेड हो, आप उसके ऊपर प्लांट करें, हमने बेड्स बना लिए. आप जो भी प्लांट करें उसमें थिक मल्च हो, like you have to have a thick layer of organic matter that's covering the ground. The fourth is you have to break the hard pan. तो आमतौर पे जो कन्वेंशनल सिस्टम के ऊपर चल रहे होते हैं वहाँ पे ट्रैक्टर्स बहुत ज्यादा यूज होते हैं, you see a lot of compaction, so there's generally a hard pan in the soil, like a cement की तरह सख्त layer जो कि पानी को जज़ब नहीं होने देती नीचे, so they're like to break that, so वो हमने पहले कर लिया, we bought a chisel machine and we did it. So हमने hard pan तोड़ दिया, हमने tillage छोड़ दिया, हमने beds भी बनाए. ये mulch वाली condition जो है ना वो हमसे meet नहीं हो रही है. So for 4 years we're trying to do that, you know, पहले हमने बेड वो chisel खरीदा, हमने hard pan तोड़ा, फिर हमने बेड मेकर मशीन खरीदी, हमने बेड्स भी बना लिए, फिर हमने जंतर लगा ली, हमने फसल लगा ली, पर हमारे पास मल्च नहीं था, या हमारे पास सीडर नहीं था which allows us to plant in a no-till system. So the last season was actually the one where we had met all the conditions, right? We actually planted a cover crop in the summer before this winter, जिसको हमने ट्रिम कर दिया, और कुछ जगहों पे ठीक है ज्यादा कवर था, कुछ जगहों पे कम कवर था, but we had a cover and we had a seeder machine and we had experienced the seeder machine for 2 seasons, so we were somewhat confident कि हाँ बस हमें बस आता है इसके साथ, हम रेजिड्यू के साथ भी लगा लेते हैं बीज, वो बीज निकल ही आता है, मतलब so fairly confident. I was like कुछ तो हो जाएगा इस season. And we had the worst germination of the last 4 seasons. And I cannot tell you how disappointed I was. I was like, Baba, मैं कहाँ जाकर मरूँ? What have we done wrong? No one can explain this to us. What has happened? And then abhi tak it seems the explanation is that we are facing this 2-year fertility dip. So now we're sort of, matlab, it seems the challenge is that these 4 principles, and anecdotally it seems, work really well in irrigated areas जहाँ लोगों के पास moisture control है. मेरा एक दोस्त है हसनपुरी, ट्विटर के ऊपर भी है, मैं उसको ये सारा किस्सा सुनाती थी ना कि कैसे हमने गंदम लगाई और बड़े वो निकली नहीं, हम बड़े नाकाम हो गए. तो सुनता रहा एंड लाइक मैं सोच रहा हूँ कि मेरे इलाके में होता हम क्या करते, तुम क्या करते, तो हम पानी दे देते. Like if you plant gandum and your gandum doesn't germinate, you water your soil and then your gandum germinates.
Yeah.
So we planted gandum in October, end of October. बारिश के बाद हमने गंदम लगाई, हमने कहा गंदम नहीं निकली, चलो कभी ना कभी तो बारिश होगी, फोटोहार है, बारिश हो ही जाती है, 50 inches of rain. January तक बारिश नहीं हुई, not a single bloody rain. Till January. फिर जब January में बारिश हुई तो वो गंदम निकल आई, but at that point the growing period was so little that we basically got no output. So it's been a very difficult season, and my discussion with other fellow farmers in Bairani regions is that you have to modify the system a little bit, because as it is, it works really well for irrigated context. In our context, the theory is कि आपके पास इतनी thick mulch हो कि जब भी बारिश हो, your soil is able to absorb it and then hold it. It's going to provide a thick layer of insulation ताकि वो फिर evaporate करके मट्टी dry ना हो जाए. But given the quality of our soils, हम 4 सीजन से हम ये कर रहे हैं कि हम फसल लगाते हैं, वो अच्छी नहीं उगती तो हम उसको काट के वहीं छोड़ देते हैं, और कुछ हो ना हो तो वो उसके ऊपर मल्च बन जाएगी, ऑर्गेनिक कंटेंट में ऐड करेगी. In spite of that, if you go and look at our lands right now, you don't even see 1 inch of like mulch, क्योंकि वो साथ साथ decompose भी तो हो रही है ना, so it's not just staying there. So getting that level of mulch has been very difficult, even though we're sort of trying to supplement. It gets a घास काट के भी डाल देते हैं.
Yeah, could you get mulch?
So that's the other thing I'm looking at, because something else they do in irrigated areas is कि जो चावल के remains हैं या गन्ने के remains हैं, वो पराली जिसको कहते हैं या मूंजी जिसे कहते हैं, वो उसको ना फैला के they'll get truckloads of it. And so we thought it would just be more efficient अगर आप अपनी फसल उगा रहे हैं, मतलब imagine you have a whole acre, अगर आपको बहुत सारे ट्रक मंगवाने पड़ेंगे उसको मैनुअली मल्च करने के लिए, एंड देयर इज अ लॉट ऑफ लेबर इन्वॉल्वड आल्सो, राइट. किसी ने उन ट्रक्स को अनलोड करना है, फिर जाके उसको खिलाना है, फिर उसके बीच में बीज लगाना है, एंड वी नो द डिफिकल्टीज ऑफ ट्राइंग टू प्लांट इन अ थिक लेयर ऑफ मल्च. तो इरिगेटेड एरियाज में ऐसी दिस कि लोगों के पास बहुत सारी लेबर है. वो हमारे एक जानने वाले थे नालाकोट में, हम उनका खेत देखने गए, वो लहसुन लगा रहे थे, पूरी फैमिली उन्होंने लगाई हुई थी, पराली का ट्रक मौजूद था, लहसुन का बीज उन्होंने लगाया, उसके ऊपर पराली फैलाई, इरिगेशन उनके पास मौजूद, he had beautiful output. हमारे पास क्या है जो जी, हमारे पास पानी भी नहीं है, हमारे पास एक बंदा है लेबर के लिए, वो लेबर हमसे पैसे भी रनारा खोट से दुगना ले रहा है, और हमें पराली भी जो है फैसलाबाद से कहीं से मंगवानी पड़ेगी, यहाँ से मिलेगी कहीं. So all of those are additional costs and logistical challenges. मतलब first I have to figure out कि मुझे कौन पराली ढूंढ मतलब भेजेगा ना, first I have to find like a seller, फिर मुझसे कोई रेट नेगोशिएट करूंगी, फिर जब मुझसे बात करते हैं सारे रेट्स दुगने हो जाते हैं. I don't know what the rates are. So these are all challenges that need to be figured out. But it's also a scale problem. Like if you're trying to mulch 5 acres, that's a lot of material that you're bringing from outside the farm. It's not quite feasible to do it as a practice. Maybe like one time you can. So our effort till now had been कि we just plant, like the best way, आपके पास जमीन है, आप उसके ऊपर फसल लगाएं, आप उसको वहीं छोड़ देना, मतलब यही होगा ना कि एक सीजन का आपको लॉस हो रहा है, for that season you're not getting output. But in our sandier soil, even that has been not going so well. So part of it is also figuring out कि जैसे थोड़ी रेतली जमीन में कौन सी फसल अच्छा cover crop होगी. So even अभी तक we had been using jantar, and our conclusion is कि jantar makes for a terrible cover crop. Probably better use pulses. So it will be a part of the learning. You have to go through it to figure out कि हमारे लिए what's the right cover crop.
Why is all of this learning that you're going through is it only possible to learn this by experiencing it yourself? Are there not people who have done similar things in your type of soil? जिनसे मतलब
not close to us, right?
अच्छा.
मतलब मेरे गांव में तो कोई भी नहीं करा. They're like आप सबका दिमाग खराब है. मतलब आप क्या करें?
Yeah. Are the गांव वाले like ये क्या करें?
मैं 2 साल से लगी हुई हूँ, so there's a lot of redemption. They're like हमने कहा था, बताया था आपको, समझाया था. I'm like हाँ, आपने समझाया तो था.
Yeah.
आप आगे की तरह लगे हुए. So not here. Now I found a few other farmers जो चकवाल वगैरह के इलाके में हैं, and they are very helpful. But they're also in the beginning of the process where, like, I'll be like, Azmat Sahab hai, मैं उनसे जाके, he's super मतलब knowledgeable and it's been very very helpful. तो मैं उनसे कहती हूँ, अजमत साहब ये जंतर जो है ना ठीक नहीं है कवर ब्लॉक की. He's like हाँ बिल्कुल ठीक नहीं है, मैं भी इसी नतीजे पे पहुंची. I'm like अच्छा ऐसे फिर आपको बताया आपने? हाँ मैंने उन्हें बताया है. मैंने कहा अच्छा वो क्या कहते हैं? वो कहते हैं हाँ ये तुम लोग की वैल्यूएबल कंट्रीब्यूशन है हमारे प्रोजेक्ट में. मेरा वैल्यूएबल कंट्रीब्यूशन and we figured out that jantar is maybe not a good cover crop for us.
Right.
But it doesn't seem like there's enough experience. There's experience in the sense that, I mean, I'm sure there is. It's also a matter of I don't know about it. But for example, I went to the agriculture department. Soil sample उनके पास में लेके गई. मैंने उनको soil sample दिखाए. So they asked, they're like, अच्छा आपको क्या advice चाहिए ना? So I told them कि लोग we're trying to go to a no-till system. So we're struggling with increasing organic content. So they actually connected me with a soil scientist at Arab University. He's like ये 10 साल से no-till के ऊपर कोटवार में ही काम कर रहे हैं. तो आप उनसे जाके बात करें. He will be familiar with your context. So I went and spoke to him and he visited our farm. And his experience is contradictory with principles of no-till farming in that उनकी 2 learnings ये थी, you cannot go on a complete no-till system. He says कि हमारी पोटवारी soils जो हैं, अगर आप उनको बिल्कुल no-till पे छोड़ दें, तो उनका organic content, I believe the figure he said was 1.29%, something like that, कि उससे ऊपर नहीं जाता because it's so hot here कि after a certain degree, soil organic matter starts decomposing. Yeah. However, the picnic system would say if you have a thick layer of mulch, then you should be able to fight off that effect of the hotness. So in theory, that shouldn't be happening. However, what he's been doing is that he's been tilling twice a year. कि वो chisel machine इस्तेमाल करें साल में 2 दफा. So not as much as the conventional system. So इसको हम reduced tillage कहेंगे. But he has been doing that. So he says कि अगर आप completely no-till पे छोड़ देंगे तो you will not see the benefits of no-till in our potwari soils. It will take too much time and there's a limit to how much organic content the soil can develop, which may very well be true. He's an experienced scientist. He's speaking from experience. However, I don't yet know anyone जिसने 5 साल बिल्कुल हल ना चलाया. Because even he has been chiseling, right? थोड़ा वो कर रहे हैं. Or maybe he has some plans, but some trial where he hasn't done it. But I'm not yet fully persuaded of his logic, where he says कि हमारी soils में complete no-till नहीं कर सकते, सिर्फ reduced tillage कर सकते हैं. So I want to see if our finding is the same. But yes, to answer your question, I haven't really found anyone who's on complete no-till. But I'm finding people. It's also that I don't know. I'm sure there are people. Sure, because वैसे तो like काफी लोग organic और no-till farming कर रहे हैं, तक्षशिलात वगैरह की साइड पे जो farms हैं. So I come across them sometimes. हाँ. So I think I'll find more people. हाँ, क्योंकि in the grand scheme of things, like 2 साल कहने को तो 2 साल हैं, but like 2 साल is not like a huge amount of time as well, right? It's not a huge amount of time at all. Yeah. इसलिए हमने 10 साल की lease sign की हुई है because from what we've read 5 साल लगते हैं transition करने में, 7 साल लगते हैं weed character change होने में, तो 10 साल तक तो मतलब आराम से निकल जाएंगे. I was going to ask, what is your time frame for this experiment? Do you have one? Yeah, is this like your life's purpose? I don't have a very defined. So I ideally I want to stick with it as long as I can. Right? I don't have an end line. 10 साल की lease है अगर, but of course there are challenges like if I apply for a PhD and end up leaving, तो फिर management मुश्किल हो जाएगी. Yeah. But it's also like a motivation thing because ठीक है because you have to realize कि 2 साल we've also been paying a guy to be on the farm and other expenses are one time. मशीनरी और 20 चीज का भी इतना नहीं होता, but the labor cost adds up and I have a limitation in how long I can afford that, and which is like I think I can afford it for quite a bit of time, but not if I'm getting no returns. Like it's okay if I'm getting some returns and have to supplement it, but if I'm getting like making no money and I have to keep feeding in, तो फिर I think that would become difficult. तो अब 2 साल से तो तकरीबन ऐसे ही निकल गए हैं कि I मतलब ओने पोने थोड़े बहुत earning, but nothing that actually helps in any substantive manner. So this year now we're like अच्छा बहुत हो गया है थोड़ा, we have to like be less purist and figure out some ways of start making some money. It's also a motivation thing, right? Like the whole idea is not कि मैं कामयाब business बना लूं, but the whole idea is to demonstrate a model that is adaptable by other people in the village. मतलब मेरे अकेले उससे इसीलिए हमने वो वाली इन्वेस्टमेंट नहीं की, वरना the way other people will do it is will be like एक बड़ी सी बोर कराते हैं, उसके साथ एक ड्रिप सिस्टम लगाते हैं, फिर वो एक कमरा बनवाते हैं, वो फैसलाबाद से एक सब्जी का एक्सपर्ट मंगवाते हैं, वो डेरे पे रहता है, and that's how you grow vegetables. And we could have done that, but it's not replicable, it's not scalable, it's not suitable to our system. So the idea is to demonstrate a system that's replicable, but also that जो हमने बंदा हायर किया वो सिर्फ हमारा मुलाजिम ना हो, but he is sort of invested, he's an equal partner. काम तो वो करे ना, मतलब लेबर तो उनका है. We're sort of more the strategists, we're thinking behind the scenes. हम गांव में भी नहीं रहते, वो गांव में रहते हैं. So in an ideal world, the aim would be for this to be a successful business that becomes adopted by someone in the village. Then it's a sort of rosy roti for them, you know. So वो फिर एक motivation factor भी बन जाता है, because even now we still have to sort of keep persuading our farm help के he's like कि देखिए आप हल चला देना, तो मतलब अभी हमने आलू लगाए हैं, जमीन सख्त है, आलू का साइज बड़ा नहीं हो रहा. he's like अगली दफा जब हल चला के लगाएंगे तो बहुत अच्छे आलू होंगे. And I'm just like पर हल तो नहीं चलाना. And he's just not persuaded because obviously वो 2 साल से देख रहे हैं कि बेवकूफ लोग लगे हुए हैं. They're insisting on this principle that's clearly not paying off. So one of the advices that Azmat Saab gave me was कि मतलब don't be so purist that it just demotivates you. You know, you have to get some returns. Otherwise, you will yourself will be like, why am I wasting my time and money here? So this year we're like, let's modify things a little bit and see if we can get some output.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to cut this short. I have so many more questions. Like, we haven't spoken about climate change and uske kya impacts tum dekhti aa rahi ho in your area. We haven't spoken about all the maps you keep putting up on Twitter ke dekho shahar expand ho raha hai, wo yahan se yahan aa raha hai, pehle aisa tha, waisa tha, which is all like super like interesting stuff to me. And हाँ बस आप वापस आ जाएं because I think I have many more questions. देखिए अवाम देखे ना देखे इसका I have no control, but like as long as we can put this together and put it out, I think this is like really great stuff.
मुझे भी शक है कि कोई देखेगा या नहीं, but as long as you're interested, I guess. Good enough.
Yeah. I mean, देखिए थोड़े से लोग हमें मिल जाएंगे शायद, but also because I think what you're doing is like, you know, I don't know many people who are doing this, and I feel as a lifelong, you know, urban person who is only now पिछले 5-6 सालों में realizing के, you know, खाना तो हमारा नहीं आता urban areas से, and all the खाना is like you know, I'm really like more and more obsessed with climate change and उसके impacts जो कि वैसे तो 10-12 साल से दिख रहे हैं, बट पिछले 5 साल से तो लाइक रियली दिख रहे हैं, लाइक ओ शिट, लाइक अब तो हो रहा है. एंड पाकिस्तान इज ऑल्सो दिस प्लेस वेयर चलो मैं तो नहीं रहता एंड शायद कभी भी नहीं रहूंगा, और अब बट आई नो सो मेनी पीपल देयर, एंड यू नो रिजवान्स लाइक मेरे घर 12 घंटे बिजली नहीं थी कल लाहौर में, एंड दैट्स ऑल्सो क्लाइमेट चेंज, राइट? सो that's going.
No, I think the most scary part of climate change is the fires. मतलब
अब तो आगे लग रही हैं.
सिर्फ आगे लगी होती हैं मुल्क के मुख्तलिफ हिस्सों में. मतलब no one's documenting it, no one's talking about impact of it. मतलब वो एक ignorance में bliss वाली हालत है. But it's all around.
So listen, so like you and me are going to do this. ठीक है, मैं आपको बता रहा हूँ. This is going to happen. This is now like just happening, and you're in this because we've done a few climate change episodes, but they're more like specific issue focused. एक हमने की थी कि लाहौर में जब पहली दफ़ा पागलों वाली स्मॉग हुई थी पहली दफ़ा like a few years ago. And then एक हमने की थी कराची में जब बारिश हुई थी पूरा शहर डूब गया था 1 साल पहले या ऐसा कुछ. तो like very specific. But I think I want there to be like a documentation of how climate change has the potential to like, because my doomsday scenario is like कि अगर हमने climate change के बारे में कुछ नहीं किया, not stopping climate change but like preparing for it, तो Pakistan as a country का bad scene है. Like, you know, there's like an existential question.
Massive migrations and
and किधर होंगी migrations, like, you know, who's going to take our people वो अभी नहीं ले रहे. तो जब you know, when it's like when we're talking about millions, it's real things like बिजली है ही नहीं तो फिर क्या होगा, खाने को रोटी नहीं है, that sort of stuff is like real. It's all very doomsday stuff. But then there's, you know, if initiatives like yours or, you know, just finding solutions kind of mindsets, वो जो मैंने शुरू से बात की थी ना कि you don't have that like tired 30-year-old vibe, you still have you seem optimistic and positive. तो the plan is कि हम ये doom and gloom की बातें करेंगे और फिर end में ना हम बताएंगे कि देखें लेकिन there is something that can be done, you know, मेहनत करने का कोई है फ़ायदा. But खैर, yeah, I also have to go because मैंने ना बहुत over efficient होके आज मैंने 2 podcast schedule कर दिए हैं. तो
it seemed a bit tough, so that's why I offered कि हम अगले weekend कर लें. It seemed it would be a bit challenging for you.
No, we'll make it happen. Yeah, but was this fine for you? Like, do you think
it was lovely?
Yeah.
It's also I've been thinking about कि I need to document and write and, you know, मतलब मुझे भी चीजें भूल रही है ना, अब 2 साल हो रहे हैं. And I haven't gotten a chance to do it, so it's been a good way for me to recollect the process. Yeah.
अगर दिसंबर में खुदा ना खास्ता मैं पाकिस्तान आ गया, जो कि which is the plan, तो इस्लामाबाद भी आना ही होगा. तो इस दफा तो मैं नहीं मिला तुमसे, but maybe we'll do something, you know, because like this is something I want to do. I don't know why this is not part of the podcast. If you stop listening, it's fine. But you know, I think this is interesting stuff, and like I said, I have a lot more questions. I'm not even going to ask you about gin stories. Do you have gin stories? Have you heard this podcast before?
I've heard selective episodes. जो मेरे like Dawar और After वाली मैंने सुनी.
Yeah. So like maybe 2 or 3
gin stories. I would like to keep them up.
Yeah, there's like 6 gin story episodes.
Oh, wonderful. Okay.
Yeah. Do you think you have any ugly dafa? Because now there is an ugly dafa. I think there's going to be several ugly dafas.
मेरी अपनी नहीं है, but I have like you
that's fine.
Okay.
सुनी सुनाई also work. ठीक है. Yeah, sorry for the abrupt ending, listeners. कोई नहीं सुन रहा. It's been nearly 2 hours. People have died. But you know, we'll break this up into clips and फिर उनके लिए जरा palatable हो जाएगा. But yeah, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad
it happened. We've been talking about it for some time.
Yeah. I've been bothering you for a long time, but फिर मैंने कहा fuck it, बस कर लो. ठीक है. Thank you very much, Ayesha. I'm going to let you go now. And जरा हम जरा debrief करते हैं. But do you want people to find you on the internet to like get in touch, follow your work?
I mean, sure. I'm on Twitter. Yeah.
Okay. Do you want me to put it like if you don't want to, मैं नहीं डालूंगा.
No, it's fine. I have nothing against it. But it's like, you know, if people of common interest. It's not like अपना professional profile बढ़ाने के लिए लोगों को बता रही हूँ because.
No. I mean to follow your work, obviously.
Like that, but yes, of course, definitely.
हाँ, बस फिर इसके बाद next step है कि तुम influencer बन जाओगी, and you know that's how we will fix everything.
Influencer से अगर पैसे मिल जाए तो ठीक है, वरना क्या फायदा?
Please get in touch with Ayesha for paid projects only. All right.
Paid projects.
Thank you very much for watching.
आपने कोने में ऐड डालना है तो मुझे बता दें. मैंने वाले साथ लोगो लग सकते हैं.
Yeah. We'll work on it. ठीक है. All right. Thanks everyone. Bye.